Welcome to the latest edition of the Access All Areas Backstage podcast. I'm delighted to introduce Geoff Ellis, CEO of DF Concerts and Events, based in Glasgow, so I'm even more grateful for you to be here, really, all the way down south today. Geoff, obviously, it's your 40th year, I believe, or the 40th anniversary of your sort of first step into the live music industry.
I started when I was 4, so yeah, mate, so maybe.
And you've done some quite interesting things along the way, everything from serving Radiohead with soup to staging an outdoor mass for the Pope to launching Scotland's biggest festival. So, I mean, it's been a pretty interesting 40 years since you were 4. It's a very dynamic, very fast-paced, quite exhausting industry to be in. What's really kept you excited and engaged and really wanting to do it for so long?
I think, hello everyone. I think it's such a dynamic industry that no 2 days are the same. I'm sure everybody finds that in their own jobs, whatever kind of sector you're in. So, it's exciting anyway. I think because you don't get the humdrum, mundane kind of thing of going into the same office every day, sit behind the same desk. In live music, you're out and about at different venues. You're going to see shows all over the globe. But I think for me, it's the people because ever since I started, the people I've worked alongside or the teams that I've led, have been great and keep you going. And the interactions that you have, be it with, the good suppliers that you have, with the agents, managers, obviously the artists as well, that is really important. But, and again, talking about people, it's the fans in terms of what we do, because we put on concerts and major festivals, concerts at all levels, so you're seeing people really enjoying that live experience. And that's very, very rewarding, because if you've created something, and it could be, just a gig in a venue, but to the people coming, it's a life-affirming moment for them, getting to see one of their favourite artists on the stage. So one, it keeps you on your toes because you've got to deliver, because you can't just go, well, it's just another gig. Because it isn't, not for the people buying the ticket. It's not. If you want them to come to another gig, that experience has got to be good. So I think that becomes an ethos that drives you as well. But it's why you enjoy doing it, because no 2 concerts are the same, even on the same tour, they're not the same. And and audiences are, well, without audiences we don't have a business, and without the artists we don't have a business. So all of us who work in it are just people who facilitate the fan getting to see their artists on stage, and even in a papal visit, it's the congregation getting to see their religious, representative, if you like, on a platform. So it's still the same kind of mechanics, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people in this room experienced that. What COVID did to the industry and their particular roles and their companies and their events and everything else, which was, a horrible time to have to live through. And, but there was that summer for a lot of people in 2022 was for live music pretty strong and amazingly strong for DF. I think you did something like 1 million tickets in that, just summer show tickets, in 2022. And I think the economic impact was something like 72 million. I forget the exact figure, but it was extremely significant. And then since then, obviously, you've gone from strength to strength. It's been a great few years this year. You've had, huge shows by Oasis and artists like that. You've just gone on sale with The Cure and numerous others. What would you say is behind the success of DF really in Scotland? And where do you go from now? I mean, are you looking to kind of diversify into beyond live music, or is it very much you focused on that?
Well, firstly, live music will always be our focus, but we changed our name from DF Concerts to DF Concerts and Events a while ago, because a lot of people were surprised when we did the papal visit, and they said, "Oh, I didn't know you did things like that." So well, it's exactly the same. You're hiring toilets, you're hiring fences, you're hiring, trackway, stewards, you're dealing with the police and licensing authority, you're building a stage, you're hiring marquees, it's the same skill set, really. Obviously, we weren't having to sell tickets. That's the difference between being an event organizer and a promoter. But we do both. So, if somebody comes along and says, listen, can you produce this event? We did the Ryder Cup opening gala concert, which obviously was music and arts led. We had the Scottish Ballet, National Scottish Orchestra, National Theatre Scotland, as well as some great live musicians. But we also did, other events in the Ryder Cup in the lead up that didn't involve music. So, that skill set, our events team can work across different disciplines. But I think, as a business, we've been fortunate to grow most years. And obviously COVID was a challenge for all of us. But we needed to get working again, and COP26 was coming to Glasgow. So, I kind of, was talking to the Scottish government and saying, look, you need to let us open with Transmit because it's outdoors. We can make everybody have a test, and eventually we got them to agree because, the Glasgow City Council was saying COP26 can't happen as the first event that Scotland does. So Transmit has to happen before we can do COP26. And we did it, and there was no spike in transmissions, as we said. Ironically, the event was called Transmit, but yeah, there was no spike in transmissions as a result of the event, and we got open. And God, did we all appreciate the value of events at that point, But yeah, look, I think we'll always look to create events because going back to 1994, when we started Teeing Apart, we were a much smaller promoting company, and we only worked when artists wanted to tour. And at that time, there wasn't that many arena shows. I was looking back, so I've got to pick my favourite, or my first and my favourite concert that I promoted at the SCCC for their 40th anniversary. I was looking at it, they used to have like 12 to 20 concerts a year in the first few years. Now they've got one almost every day, literally. So, the market has grown, considerably, but we started Teeing Apart so that we had a bit more control over where the business was going. And, now festivals are happening every weekend throughout the summer, not just the summer, but, it was necessary for us to do that. Otherwise we were only working kind of October to December, and maybe February to April. And that was when the touring cycles were. So we've always had to innovate to grow the industry, or to grow the business. And I think that's true for a lot of people in a similar position. You've got to keep coming up with new events, and events come and go as well. So you have to look at how you replace an event. We had Teeing Apart for 23 years. It's one of the biggest festivals in the world. But, it ran its course, and we had to come back with something else. So we created Transmit in a different model, non-camping, city centre metropolitan festival. And our summer sessions events that we started when we were doing Teeing Apart. Again, it's like, well, all our eggs in one event basket, if you like. So let's create something else with a point of difference. It's more of a concert series than a festival. So yeah, hopefully we keep growing, and so long as the market keeps growing, which it has done significantly over the last 10 years, I would say, then I think we're all in good shape as an industry.
Great. So going back a fair bit to 1992, you applied for a job at King Tut's Wild Club, 300 capacity venue in Glasgow, for a booker, and got the job, obviously. And a year later, it was your decision to let an unknown band called Oasis join the bill one night, that led Alan McGee from Creation Records to sign that band. That's a pretty momentous gig, really. What was your sort of lasting memories of that kind of show? And can you just sort of talk us through how that kind of actually adding to the bill happened?
Yeah, well, it came about. We obviously I'd only been working there for a year, and I was in our office in Stuart Clumpus's house. It was the basement of his house on the south side of Glasgow is where our office was. There was only like 5 of us, I think, at the time, and I was working late booking the first Scene Apart lineup, trying to put that together. I get a call from our rep, a guy called Ali, who I'd worked with at the M.I.C.E. He was the venue manager at the M.I.C.E. when I booked it. And he said, "Oh, there's an extra band turned up." And there was a Manchester band on the bill called Sister Lovers who used the same rehearsal space as Oasis. And they were friends. And there's a Glasgow band who are on Creation called Boyfriend. So it was basically a 3-band bill. And Oasis had got a load of their mates off the estate to chip in to pay for the van and pay for the petrol on the promise that they'd have a night out in Glasgow. So obviously nobody thought to kind of arrange it with the venue, because back in those days people didn't advance shows. I mean, some artists at stadium level who still don't advance shows, but they turned up and said, "Oh, we're with Sister Lovers," and everybody said it's okay for us to play tonight. So the rep, rightly was, "Well, let me check this out." So gave me a phone, and I said, "Well, the sharing backlines, getting 4 bands on a tiny stage in a 300 capacity venue wouldn't be easy." And he said, "Yeah, they're going to share a backline with Sister Lovers." So I'm like, "Well, they're not wanting paid, are they? And can our sound engineer cope with it?" And it's like, "Yeah, he can manage it." I'm like, "Well, fine, yeah, let him play." Give him some beers, and that was fine. Obviously, the story came out that they threatened to smash the place up, because that was a much more rock and roll story than I've just conveyed, and that helped, establish, the image around Oasis. But there's a little bit of truth in that when I was in Mexico City with them a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys who was he still works with Noel and Oasis quite closely, so he was. I think he was a guitar tech on that tour. He said, "Well, actually, the guys who they got in the van with him probably would have kicked off had Oasis not been on the bill, because they'd funded them to go up there, and were expecting a bit of a party and to see their mates playing. But it's all fine. There's only 69 people at the gig, so there's almost as many people. Well, there probably was as many people in the 4 bands as there was in the venue. It's a bit of an unremarkable gig, but Alan McGee obviously saw something in them, and it was kind of by chance that he was there. He was meant to get a train. I think he'd missed it. And because Boyfriend were on his label, he thought, "Well, I'll go up to the venue," and obviously the rest is history. And he signed him, and they've not done too bad for themselves, really. So,
and obviously you did 3 shows at Murrayfield this year with them.
Yeah,
that must have felt like a bit of a full circle moment.
Yeah, and that's a great honour, and obviously the guys at Live Nation and SGM put together a proposal for them, and and fortunately they said yes, and I put the logistics together for the 3 Scottish shows, which went remarkably well, and just short of 70,000 a day. During the busiest period in August, the busiest period in Edinburgh, which is August, because you've got the Tattoo, you've got the Fringe, the International Festival, you've got lots of things taking place. Hotel prices are through the roof, but they're through the roof anyway. So so loads of people stayed in Glasgow who came to the concert, so Glasgow got a real boost from it. But they're fantastic concerts as well. And it's great to see people kind of my age in tears of joy, because Oasis were back together again, and they never thought they'd see it. And they were there at the concert quite often with their kids who would be 20, 21, but who have grown up on Oasis, but have been too young to ever see them play live. So, and I include my son and daughter in that. They bought tickets as well. And they loved it and felt part of something. The atmosphere, I mean, the first show I went to I went to the first night at Cardiff. The atmosphere in the city centre before the show was incredible, and afterwards, no trouble, not a bit of trouble. Everybody out drinking and enjoying themselves, but a real party atmosphere. And the same, happened in Edinburgh and everywhere else on the tour, basically, and, it's a fantastic tour. And the day after that Cardiff show, I went to see the Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath concert in Birmingham, which, different set of circumstances, but still a very joyous occasion for all the fans going to that, and real takeover of Birmingham by Black Sabbath fans.
Going back again, there was a time, I believe, where your ambition was to get into architecture. You would have missed quite a lot of fun, I think, if you would have gone down that route. But you ended up going to becoming an events manager at Middlesex Poly. And obviously getting involved in music at that point and staging shows. How kind of formative was that period? I mean, at one point, I believe you got involved in journalism, which is not a wise move, I think. But can you just talk us through that kind of area? Because I understand that you worked quite closely with Rob Ballantyne, who obviously a lot of people will know as a director at SJM Concerts.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think because I played with Lego a lot as a kid, I wanted to be an architect and never kind of made it. I was left school initially to be a stonemason, so that was what my dad had done, and and ended up not meeting up with him. I was going to go to Bath Technical College for a year and try and become a stonemason, and ended up doing a diploma in building at Middlesex Poly at Stockport College. And the first thing that we were told on the first day was, if anybody thinks they're going to be an architect from doing this course, they've got another thing coming. So it's like, oh, great, So I kind of persevered with that, and then went to Coventry Poly, doing a building degree, and hated it. And so I left after the first term, managed to get into Middlesex Poly to do a humanities degree. So I thought I wanted to do something that was more arts based and that I was more interested in. And I started writing for the student magazine, the Student Union magazine. My first gig I reviewed was Love and Money, who ironically were managed by Stuart Clumpers, who was the founder of DF Concerts and King Tut. So that was a nice kind of full circle moment as well with Love and Money there. I started, writing about all the concerts, and then got involved in the entertainments crew there. And then the job came up as entertainments manager as a permanent job. So I took that on and did that for 4 years and loved it, And it probably set me up well for Scotland, because Middlesex Poly, if anybody knows it, is seven campuses, or was at the time 7 campuses all over North London, from Enfield to Hendon to Cockfosters, Trent Park, and All Saints in Tottenham, where I had my office. So that got me into by necessity, whenever I did a concert, I had to organise buses from all those different places to take people to the concerts. And that kind of bodes well for Scotland, because Scotland is a lot of tiny places spread over a large area of landmass, apart from Glasgow and Edinburgh itself. But if you're doing a concert at the Hydro, you pull from all over Scotland. There's not enough people in Glasgow to sustain the amount of concerts that take place in Glasgow without people travelling from all over. So, that's a very early lesson in knowing that if you want people to come to your events, you've got to lay on transport and make it easy for them, or easier for them. And so then enjoy that. Got to know Rob Ballantyne, who was doing a similar job at Salford and then Manchester Uni. Manchester Uni. There's other people like Neil Mather, who's tour managers Oasis. He was at Leicester Poly, I think. There's quite a few people from that generation of entertainment managers who now all work in the live music industry as well. So yeah, we did that. Stone Roses was probably the highlight of the best booking I managed to do at Middlesex Poly. The first one was a Certain Ratio, and that was a real challenge because it all kicked off. The PA didn't turn up because they'd had a falling out with the Certain Ratio on the previous show, so they didn't turn up. And then I had to book another PA company about 6:00 at night, got them there, and remarkably the show happened. But the original PA company turned up feeling guilty, and then there was a fight between them and the band, and it all kicked off. but what an exciting gig. And that was the first gig I booked, and they were one of my favourite bands. And so that was a great introduction to the business, and booked Stone Roses off a demo tape, which I was particularly proud with, because they didn't turn out too bad either. So, but after that, I left because foolishly myself and Rob thought we could set up a national student magazine, a lifestyle magazine. We thought, we know what we're doing. We can do that. And, I gave up my job and went off to do that just at the time that publishing crashed and the recession hit and everything else. Like, oof. And fortunately, manager Steve Parker at Miracle got me the job as a booker of the M.I.C.E club. So that that saved my bacon for a little bit. And we then saw the job for King Tut, and a couple of years later, I did some club promotion and everything in the meantime. Myself and Rob were partners in doing club nights around London, and then we moved up to King Tut. Initially thinking I'd move up for a couple of years, and ended up staying up there really. So
you mentioned Steve Parker there. He actually ended up getting involved in trade live music industry business magazines. And I'm just wondering, I've been involved in them for a long time. I'd just be interested to know kind of how highly you value that kind of the trade press.
I think it's important because, and that's, I always try to support it, whether it's Polestar, IQ, Access All Areas, whatever. I think it connects us all. And when we have issues, it's a way of everybody getting some balanced coverage on a subject. It gives us information. It allows, if you've got a venue in Norwich and there's a feature on it, every promoter gets to see it. Touring people get to see it. Agents maybe think, actually, might include that place. It looks like it's, it fills a gap in the market. There's a lot to be said for it, because a lot of us, run our own businesses, or are involved in running our own, areas of a business, and it's very easy to feel isolated or just in a silo. And I think it's good when you can, see what other people are doing and just realize, oh, right, that person's doing all those, sporting events. Actually, they could maybe do what they're doing at live music events as well. It could be that you see some innovative accommodation kind of offering that somebody's doing for a golf event that you think, actually, we could get those into music, camping festivals. So I think it's very valuable. I think it's valuable that as an industry, we all support them, because, again, times of crisis like COVID, or, changes in the law, different things that can affect us all. It's important to have those publications that we can all kind of, learn from, and as I say, it brings us together. And I'm sure a lot of people have met just at this conference, have met people that they wouldn't have necessarily come across in the day-to-day workings, and that can only benefit each of you, really.
That's the right answer. Thank you very much. Obviously, you've been involved in festivals for a very long time. You and Stuart Clumpus, who used to obviously run DF Concerts, launched Tea in the Park. I mean, you've seen the kind of industry evolve greatly over those years. How would you kind of compare it now to when you first set out? And what kind of excites you most about the way that the industry is kind of evolving?
I think it's much more inclusive now than it ever was. And I think, when I started promoting, I think there's 2 women agents, don't know of any promoters, and it was very much, a male-dominated industry, and people would rightfully say it is still, but it's far more inclusive than it ever was in many respects. But I think the biggest shift I've seen is audiences, and people keep saying, obviously money's tight for a lot of people. How does our industry or individual businesses keep growing? Well, it's because more people are going to live music than ever before. So it's not necessarily that people are able to afford to spend more money on concerts, but more people are going to concerts, and that's definitely true. We're seeing that, and concerts and festivals are more inclusive. Venues are much better than they used to be, with accessibility, with providing sensory spaces at festivals. We do that at Transmit. We have a sensory room that if somebody's overwhelmed, they can go into. In the past, they would have had to leave, and now people know, well, that's there, so I'll risk buying a ticket because I know that if my child or if I have an issue at the gig, I've got a safe space to go to, so I'll still go. They might not use it, but just the reassurance of knowing that it's there, knowing that there's support from event staff. And I think people, we've seen it with the LGBTQIA plus community, far more comfortable going to concerts and festivals probably than ever before, because they feel welcome, and I'd like to think that's something we do at our events, but I see it across the industry. It's not just our events. I think stewarding companies are better now. They're more aware of challenges that people might have. In the past, people who were peer drunk were refused admission from venues. Now people go, so they might not be drunk. They might have a communication issue. I think everybody's more aware, and that's helped make people feel more included and safer. And concerts are safe, not just in a physical sense, but in a supportive sense. So I think that the market's definitely grown, because of that, and that's probably the biggest change I've seen. And artists have to take a lot of the credit for that. People like Lord, like Billie Eilish, like Chapel Roan, Harry Styles, etc., etc. They've all made a point of making making people feel more comfortable, and rather than people feeling like outsiders in the past, perhaps, but that their counterparts now feel, well, I might still be an outsider, but I'm going to be at that event with all the other outsiders. So so they feel more comfortable in going to the live music space. And certainly we've seen at music festivals. At Transmit, it's probably at least 55% female, whereas when we first started seeing the park, it's probably 70% male. So, and that's not just because of programming. That's how it's evolved into, festivals are seen as, not the place that a load of drunken lads go to. That festivals are now for everybody, really.
Okay, we were talking about independent festivals earlier on, and the sort of ongoing campaign for VAT relief. And there's obviously a lot of work going on to support grassroots as well, MVT, the Live Trust, and obviously you've had a close relationship with one of the best known and loved grassroots venues there is in the UK for many years. I mean, how do you feel enough is being done to support the slightly more fragile, if you like, end of the business? So the kind of the grassroots talent, the grassroots promoters, venues, everything else.
I think, look, it's tougher. Whilst I'm saying more people are going to live music than ever before, the costs of putting on live music, have shot up. Particularly since COVID, the cost of touring has shot up. Obviously, the impacts of Brexit. So it's tough for everybody working in the ecosystem in smaller venues, because you don't have the big sponsorship deals, you don't have the big volume of ticket sales, so you're working on smaller grosses. If you're a support band, support bands have been paid 50 quid for 40 years, and you could be getting that on an arena or on a small club, so that probably doesn't even cover the fuel costs. Record company support isn't there, so it's definitely tough on the artists. Look, there's lots of venues unfortunately close, there's other venues open. In Scotland, we're not seeing too many closing of the established live music venues, at least. But that's not to say they've all got an easy ride, because they haven't. Alcohol sales are down for everybody, and the costs of, the duty on alcohols, obviously high in the UK, higher than it is in most parts of Europe. People are drinking less, when they're going to concerts, so people are having to rely on the ticket money more to pay for everything. So it is tough. Obviously, there's the levy the voluntary levy that some tours are bringing in, and I think that will grow as more people are aware of where the money goes to in terms of the live trust and the ecosystems. That's a positive thing. We need the government to either charge a VAT on it, that they donate or contribute at least that same amount back into the live ecosystem. Otherwise, the Treasury is unduly benefiting from it, and they already benefit to a huge sum from live music. And I'm a big advocate of reducing VAT to ideally 5% for venues under 1,000 capacity, because that will make a tangible difference. The Treasury are not interested at all. Chris Brown, I think, was sympathetic to it, but the Treasury wouldn't listen. But at least say where money is raised via a levy if the artists want to do it, and it should be an artist. Well, it has to be an artist's decision. Let's make sure the Treasury isn't just pocketing that 20% or 20p in the pound, and that it's coming back into the industry.
Okay, and when it comes to someone who might be considering a career, not in architecture, doing something more sensible like concert promotion, I mean, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's looking at that? I know everyone here is a leader in our industry, not stepping into it, but I'm just interested to hear, for the listeners to this podcast, what kind of advice you would give to, say, a student that's looking at taking their first steps into concert promotion or event operation generally? Yeah,
well, I think, look, it's not just about the glamour of booking artists. You can have a career in this industry and work in the events industry. And talking about live music in particular, because that's my area, there's lots of support services. You can be a tour accountant, which is a specialism. Obviously you need to be an accountant first, but there's jobs in the industry for that. There's obviously jobs on the road for techs and tour managers, tour directors, production designers, creative people. There's lots of jobs out there, and not every concert promoter has to be somebody booking bands. We've got over 40 full-time staff at DF, plus, a load of part-time staff as well with King Tut. So we, and only 6 of those book bands. So I would guess I'd be saying to them, if you want to be a concert promoter and book bands, start small and work within your means, because, the minute you start overstretching just because you've got a great idea, we all have great ideas, but, I've lost, 7-figure sums on some events, but not before I was making 7-figure sums on other events and could afford to do it. You've got, if we'd have started teeing apart without being established concert promoters, we wouldn't have survived the first year, and people wouldn't have got paid. And, your reputation is everything. So, build organically. You might grow quite quickly anyway, but build organically. Don't come in and go, I've got a great way of changing, the music festivals. Well, do your 1,000 hours first, build up your contacts, build up the trust, get people to support you and take a chance with you. But don't blow it by we all have wild ideas. The difficulty is bringing them to fruition. So make sure you can afford the losses, because everybody thinks, well, people think they can fund things out of ticket sales. If the ticket sales aren't there, nobody's getting paid, and that's crap for suppliers. It's crap for artists, and even if the fans get a refund, which quite often they don't, but even if they get a refund, they don't want the refund. They wanted the experience that they paid for. So come in, earn your spurs, I would say, and build organically, and and be honest. Just be honest, and people will keep working with you. And it's not an easy industry, but it's a great industry. And and that the testament to that is the amount of people who are still in it, who've been in it for a number of years. Maybe it's because they can't get a job doing anything else. I don't know, but look, I'd encourage them for certain. I'm not sure my kids will do that. My daughter maybe, but my son's more likely to be on the stage, or at least writing the songs. But we'll see.
Okay, and just lastly, obviously you've been to millions of gigs, but I'm thinking about the ones. You've staged a huge number of events over the years. If there was one that you could just relive again, what would it be?
Well, look, I think it's always got to be Tina Parks. That was the first festival we did, and it was one of the first in the UK. There's only really Glastonbury, Reading, there's WOMAD as well. But, in terms of the market we were in, there's Glastonbury and Reading. We positioned Tina Park to be halfway between Reading and Glastonbury in terms of ethos and, lineup and everything else. So that, and it was, over 90,000 people at its peak. So, there's got to be that as an event. But what's the favourite one? I don't know, because, that feeling on the Sunday night when the fireworks are going off and, you stood next to Dave Grohl watching the fireworks after the Pipers played Flower of Scotland. Those moments, you see the crowd just really loving it. And, those are the key moments. The Who, was one of my highlights because they're a band who predated Tina Park, obviously. And seeing them enjoy themselves, at the end of a gig, they walked off. It could have been Morecambe and Wise. They both had their arms around each other and dancing off the stage. Pete Townsend doesn't do that normally after a gig. He's usually really angry. So, and Roger was saying to the audience, you were better than Woodstock. So that to have pulled off that gig with a band, we had, I think, Strokes and Arctic Monkeys underneath them. So we had a contemporary bill underneath them because our audience wasn't Who fans. It was, a Tina Park audience. It was 18 to 25-year-olds in the main. But it was a great, they were brilliant, and we pulled it off for them. They enjoyed it. The fans loved it. And it was like, yeah. And it almost felt like that was a coming of age moment because, all the other bands we'd had as headliners, but be it Oasis, be it, Foo Fighters, Strokes, Arctic Monkeys, etc., they'd all grown up, if you like, with Tina Park and started lower down the bill, and then, going on to headline. There was a band who were big before we started Tina Park. So that was a highlight, really, I guess.
Brilliant. Well, I hope there's many more highlights. Thank you very much, Geoff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.